one thing I'm curious about is just with stuff like the touring and the UK drum show, your your clinics and everything else you do, like how do you divide your time between that sort of stuff and the daily tasks that if we're in families, our significant others all hope we do. What does a month in the life look like for you these days?
Every month, of course, is different, from month to month. Day to day is different. We have a schedule that helps me out tremendously for my kiddo. She's kind of locked in to her morning routine, her evening routine. We know we get her to bed. We start her bed process around 8, so we can try to get her sleep, around 8:30. Um, so when I'm home, I'm home. I'm just kind of like, you know, I got emails backed up, which is normal, and if it's something absolutely pressing, I'll step away for 15, 20 minutes and take care of it. But most of the time lately, because of the kiddo, and it won't be like this always, right? She's gonna grow up, that type of thing. So right now, it's just really about her. The UK drum show was easy. Flew out on Thursday. I was there all week, and I was home by Monday, Tuesday, and right back in the saddle, that type of thing. So usually I try to do the turnaround trips. I just think, I guess I could look at it as, I know everybody's concept or respect of what they believe as far as like a religion or different. But for me, I'm really grateful um, that God kind of lines things up. It's been power weekends since she's been born. Maybe 1 week here, 1 week there, um, which is tough on my wife, but she's a trooper. This is one of my wife's biggest um, bucket list. To have a baby and a family. So which was also mine. That type of thing. So. Um, it's not that we don't want it. We really wanted this. So we've rearranged everything ahead of time to try to, make this happen as much as possible. Given that, okay, she's going to be mainly the stay at home mom for a little while. My wife's
Mm.
also a dope drummer, so she would love to get back to teaching lessons and doing her thing, on her side. So everything happened in this time. And we're just spending the day at a time. We just enjoying the flow. Um, I drove to my birth city, Saginaw, Michigan, yesterday, and we hung out with my uncle and his kids, and their kids came, and that was the first time them meeting my wife, officially instead of over Zoom during COVID and all of that type of stuff. So,
Mhm.
um, things are happening, things are moving positively. So, it's not bad, it's really not bad. I just, I wish I was able to. Actually, it's not really a problem. It's just something that we just got to go through, right? I mean, we got to give my daughter's name is Nia. We got to give Nia her space, and my wife is just loving this at home mom. That's what she wanted to do, so it's working so far.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, when you are spending time on musical stuff, what's the center of the bullseye in terms of the stuff you're working on and the stuff that's firing you up the most?
Right now, it's more my own stuff. I'm really, really trying to get my studio aspect together. I would love to get a nice building at some point, or either build it in a home, So until I can get it like I want it, I just kind of use what I have, that's I'm always that type of person. Like I'm gonna use whatever I got until I can make it better. So um for me, I really want to be home more in my studio doing whatever that entails, private lessons, sessions, writing. I'm about to order a new bass soon, a new Music Man, so I can get back to on the grind for that, that type of thing. And I got to set up my keyboard again and all of that. that's really where I'm at. You know, if it's a tour for artists at this point after 30 years, I'm like, I'm very picky at this point. It's like if it ain't really something that I'm like, okay, yeah, this is gonna be fun all the way around, right? From the details to the travel to the accommodations to the pay, to the clientele, even, like I don't, I've done it all. I'm really blessed and fortunate. I'm really grateful to say that I've pretty much been on all the major stages, all the major festivals, big tours, 30 semis, 25 tour buses, tours. I've done it all, down to the jam band. We all in one sprinter, hitting all the hot clubs in all of the cities, that type of thing in different countries, so I'm not really like, oh yeah, this is gonna be cool. That I've had that day, So if it ain't like really, really like jaw dropping, and I know it because I run the details by my wife, and she's like, and I'm like, nope, that's a good sign. I didn't listen the first 2 times, and I paid the cost. I was like, oh, you know, but we got through it. We had lots of problems and all that, and my wife was like, "I told you it might not be a good situation." So I think I'm in that stage. I remember hearing some of my heroes be in that stage, and I thought, "Wow!" I'm like, "No, man, I'll never stop touring. I'm always gonna." And then here I am,
Yeah.
falling in line.
Well, as you say, life kind of tees up the right thing for you at the right time period. At least if we're lucky. So I want to turn to, I don't want to say a more controversial topic, but something that's interested me for a while, which is sheds and drumming as competition. So one of the most viral clinic clips of you on the internet is obviously the clip referencing a word that I won't bring up if you don't bring up, but essentially about this the system of improvisation that developed in the church. And
Yes.
in that clip, you describe these long overnight sheds where the services would be over and people would just move 4 or 5 drum kits into the center and just shed all night. As an outsider, I really like that idea. Like I've actually been seeking it in my life a little bit, like trying
Hmm.
to set up 2 drum kits, trying to play that sort of thing more, because I think it's a good way to hone the craft. What would you say to people who say like, well, music isn't a competition. We shouldn't encourage competition in music, like, which is maybe also a valid viewpoint. Like, how do you reconcile those two things?
This is always a tricky topic for me, given that I was fortunate enough to win the Guitarist and the Drum Off in 2001, you know. So I don't ever want to contradict myself, but the core of me is just I'm a fan of music. I'm a fan of music. I'm a student of the game. I love music. I love to be in the moment where they ask me whether they ask me to play one single note or they ask me to play a million. Doesn't matter to me. I don't care. It's like it's all art. It's all expression at the end of the day. It's corporate dollars that get involved. Now it makes it a thing. You understand? It was beautiful before they got involved. Oh, let's have a drum competition. Why? Because it brings in money, sponsorship and and everything that entails that. So for me, I grew up as you've seen on the clip. I mean, man, that was so normal for us to get together. We looked forward to that instead of hanging out with our bros and not knowing if we're gonna get into a fight or we're gonna get shot or we're on the wrong side of town or we're gonna get robbed or blah blah blah. Like it just kept us away from a lot of that. So we looked forward, man. We could get together and we would eat. A lot of times it was like these 24-hour spots to eat at, like Coney Island in Detroit or Benny's or you know what I'm saying? Like, but those moments where we would go and eat, White Castle, that was another famous one. Um, we would go home or in LA to taco trucks, that type of thing, whatever, wherever you are. Um, we would go home, go to these events, and it was like during the eating, it was like times where we could share. That's when we found out, like, oh man, we gotta keep our brother encouraged, or we gotta pray for him because his dad's going through something, or he lost his mom, or brother died, or it was a way to keep contact and keep in touch with each other, and it built the brotherhood. Um, of course, everybody wasn't in the circle. It wasn't closed. It wasn't exclusive. It was just we just have a certain frequency that we operate in. We just try to be cool and just love on each other, so to speak. And in general, if you came with any kind of other motive, you were the one that fell out of place, not us. And a lot of cats didn't have what we have, but then somehow they found their own circle to do that with. So I thought it was beautiful. This was way before YouTube. This was before we even had a iPhone, that type of thing. And then all of a sudden, I'm hearing this, oh, this drummer versus this drummer, and I'm like, huh? The fuck is this? Like, I've had to correct people sometimes on clips, especially when it comes to me. I'll chime in and I'll tag the owner, and I was like, um, if you could just take out one word for them, they're like, at VS, if you could just take that out, we're good. How about such,
Yeah.
such, 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 just sharing? How about that? But I understand why they put the verses in there because it's controversial and it causes attraction. You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, there's no prize at the end, so it's not really a competition. We're just hanging out, and I'm like, ugh, I hate what it's done. This image, for people who really don't understand where it's coming from. Um,
Hmm.
I know I'm rambling. I get passionate about that because I'm doing my best to try to play my part to just correct it. And that's why I try to hold sheds, and I have criteria about the shit. Like, okay, let's work on seven. Let's work on five. Let's work on three. Other than the typical, standard hip hop beat, yeah, we'll have a moment with that. All right, let's get away from the combinations for a while. The hand and foot combinations always 30 seconds. Let's play in triplets. Let's do some phrasing. And I always try to interject those things, without being offensive or making people feel like what they do isn't special. What you do is special. It's gonna be beautiful somewhere, somehow, right? It's art. It's all, I guess subjective. But I'm always an advocate for shedding because I know what it did for us. So I'm never gonna shun it, right? But at the same time, make it purposeful, right? Let's have a purpose or design within it. Um, and then at the end of the day, I think the more this is seen, then that whole versus thing, it dies. It dies because it just changes people's perspective. Of what it. And the sad part about it is when you get to talking amongst producers, and managers, they're like, is he one of those YouTube choppers? I'm like, Christ, man. I'm like, uh, sometimes I'm looking at them like, what do you expect them to do? Right? They don't have gigs, right? They don't have a name. They're not sitting here. I'm blessed to sit here. Okay, let's just be honest. On this particular situation, I'm talking to you. I'm blessed to sit here and I'm making $1,500 a day. A lot of people won't do that. They won't get there. It's just what it is. Does everybody have a possibility? I think so if they would apply themselves. But we all know the reality is everybody won't make it. So I'm asking the manager sometimes, without being offensive, like, what do you expect them to do? That's all they got is YouTube. So they're going to they're going to put their best foot forward at all times. I'm like, give them some space. That's where
I
they are.
agree.
That's what's popular. And it's a mixed bag, man. It's a mixed bag. I just wish I always say I think we could solve all the world's problems if everybody concentrated on one word, consideration. If everybody concentrated on this, we would be good as humans. We really would.
Yeah, that's very well put. I also think you have an effect where probably the younger generation grew up watching some of these older sheds, some of the first sheds to end up on YouTube. And now it's like whenever a couple people sit down with kits at Berkeley, like there are 10 people in the room with cell phones. And that's going to cause the vibe to be different too, for better or worse.
Yep.
But I also track what you're saying about how we should not necessarily be judgmental of quote unquote insta choppers, because I completely agree with you that so all of the sort of things everybody says I believe are true, that it's compressed drumming into only quickly edited clips. It's taken away what drummers do the other 90% of the time. Like
exactly.
It's incentivized a style of playing that's very egoic, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also with you that it's so difficult to make money in music. And any way people can find to monetize their sitting down at the drum kit and playing, rather than do some kind of gig which maybe early in life is great for them, like a wedding band or something, but which ultimately isn't their dream. Their dream's to develop a creative voice, or do something other than music, like be a banker or a lawyer or something like that. And that's what I struggle with as well with things like the drum off, because yes, money comes in and it changes the vibe, right? But on the other hand, it's to some degree, if those drummers aren't recognized, then nobody gets paid. And I think
no one gets paid.
It's a mixed bag, right? The drum off deserves a lot of credit for raising the profile of a lot of great drummers who otherwise maybe only would have been in church, right? Yeah.
I'm a beneficiary, of it. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from.
So I think another thing I'm interested to hear about is some of the nitty gritty, because you spoke about the sort of camaraderie and the family aspect of everybody getting together and sharing licks. And I think that's a beautiful way to reconcile the sort of formative forces of sheds with also like being true as artists and not bringing ego into it. But I'm also curious what you were shedding by yourself in the practice room during that time. Like to the degree you remember, like, yeah, because in that clinic you talk about the combos, but to the degree you're able to remember, and I'm not a disinterested party because I'm working on some similar things. Do you remember what that practice regime looked like, either specifically or just in general?
Yeah, everything before Drummers Collective was just, I was listening to all of the hottest record, the latest records I would get, stuff I could find on Dennis and Vinny and Dave and Steve Smith and Virgil, Terry Bozzio. I was into a lot of fusion stuff at that point. I started out gospel, right? And then I had like this little transistor style radio. It was like in a yellow emergency light with antenna. Um, and I moved from the inner city, sort of kind of more towards the suburb type vibe. And I didn't really have all the best radio stations. I didn't have the inner city radio station anymore. So I had 102.5, I believe, 102.5 FM. And that was more of like the rock, pop, whatever was popular at that time. So I would listen to the radio, and what's crazy is it was background music most of the time, just to have something in the room. But I found myself learning a lot of songs subconsciously, White Snake, Aerosmith, so I was into punk rock, that's how I ended up loved playing with Beck. Of course I caught him in his later years. I was worried. I was like, man, is he still launching drums across the stage? I'm like, Sonar's not gonna be too happy about this, but I said, we'll figure it out. Maybe, it'll be all the Chinese kids, that type of stuff. But I was happy to finally get, some double bass. I had two bass drums on that gig. I was like, yes, finally I can, really bash out on a gig. And I've been living this stuff and studying this stuff for years. subconsciously and consciously. Um, so it was all by ear. That's what I'm trying to say. It was like anything was really by ear. I didn't really do a lot of the book work because I just wasn't disciplined at the time. And I just came to a ceiling, you know. Thankful it was a glass ceiling, and I got to the collective and they were like, basically, long story short, they were like, oh, okay, you can play. We've tossed everything at you. We know you can play it and play it well and give us 4 or 5 versions, different variations of it. But do you understand it? And then the light bulb went off and they were like, okay, now, man, they started kicking my butt. It was just, I had a piece of sheet music in front of me 24/7 at that point, and I'm so grateful, man, because it brought the discipline that I needed finally that was missing from my life and my playing.
Mm.
Um, so after the collective, the sheds became a mixed bag. You know, I didn't want to forego what made me who I am. So I always dedicated a couple hours to just blow, just go crazy, do my thing. But then I also made sure to add equal amount of time on the dedicated like new breed, Jim Chapin, Kim Plainfield's book, Advanced Techniques, I'm sorry, Jim Chapin's book, Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer, Plainfield's book, Fred Klatt's. I did a little bit of Alan Dawson here and there. Those were all great. I'm never gonna knock someone's personality about what makes them them, right? It's
Mm.
it's 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 beautiful. Does it always work for everyone? No. And the other thing is, um, the times change, right? The sound changes because of the times change. What was popular then, you know, it's not popular now. And what I notice is the teachers were getting pigeonholed because they built their whole life on this 80s thing,
Mm.
right? And the 80s thing is no longer popular. And now they're struggling to get students. And
Right.
I'm like, he's a great drummer. And I'm like, okay, it's a lot of moving parts to this issue, right? Before we get to the personal, we got to where the sound has changed. What's required? We don't use big toms anymore. You know, people don't just let the drums have any kind of overtones anymore. Like stuff like this, like everything is changing. Social media is changing everything 7 times faster now, that type of thing. So, and then the personal aspect is, are you willing to evolve? Are you willing to keep up with the times? I tried them all and I was failing. And I got to a point where I was like, one thing will never change: time. A quarter note will always be a quarter note here in the year 30, 33, 33. A quarter note will always be a quarter note. So I focus more on with my students. Hey man, let's really get to the point where you and time are like best friends. You're understanding your relationship with every part of the beat, the quarter note, the downbeat, the E, the and, the trip, the let, you know, and sort of like everything on booking extremes, right? But it's all based upon just understanding time and making sure you are connected to time so that you are prepared to be whatever you need to be for whatever's current, which will always change. I just refused to keep up with the rat race. It was becoming expensive. Oh, now I got to get a cowbell thing. Okay, we're not doing the Latin thing anymore. Okay, now I got to get a double bass thing. I'm like, man, this is crazy. I'll be broke. you know, I'll be absolutely broke trying to get. I got to get a MPC. Oh, they're not doing the MPC. They're doing the laptop. I'm like, Jesus, man, this is, So as far as what the sheds were for me, at least for the last, let's see, 10 to 15 years, it's just been time. I am just really, really concerned about having a greater understanding and a deeper relationship with time. And the more I do this, the easier it is when somebody sends me a CD or I got to play a style. Or it's like, bam, I can now worry about the flavor to be authentic in it. You know what I'm saying? Especially if it's more of
Mm.
a culture thing like Brazilian, right?
Yep. Yep.
I can have the interdependence and the you know the concepts of the right. I can do that because I've worked on it in the time, conundrum. But now I need to focus on the feel, right?
Hmm.
And that's fun because I got the mechanical stuff out of the way,
Yes.
So listening to someone like Isaac Jamba, this type of thing. And listening to him and like checking him out, okay, he's doing this, this is what it is, that's what he's doing, this is the understanding of this and that. So um that's really what's kind of like in my sheds situations now.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm very, very curious to dig in a little bit to time. I know we're drawing to the close here before I have to let you go, but this is a subject that's fascinated me a bunch too. So I'm curious, were there any particular things that you discovered in terms of ways to practice time that created breakthroughs for you? And or like, what do you give to your students to help them break through to develop better time and timing?
I like to say it as like it's kind of like a Mac computer, you know. We got a little bit of everything, and I'm really challenging my students to understand each individual part of the computer so that you get the final result is what you want to see, right?
Right.
What you want to see and what you want to hear. There's a lot of moving parts in these new Mac computers, right?
Yes.
But none of it is important. None of these parts are important without the M1 chip, the processor, right? I like to say it like this, you're only as good as your processor. You're only as fast with your hands and your feet as your processor. Well, what do you mean? Yeah, you can physically play it, but you don't own it yet, right? Because you can't process it, right? Most people can't process it at the speed that they play it. That's why they don't play with a certain level of confidence or conviction, you know? So it's really about um time management. That's the other factor. I like to say, hey, like, because I like to answer that question, get it out the way. Oh, how long should I practice a day? Look, I used to put in 9, 12 hours without even looking at a clock. So, I mean, if you're asking me that, we already got a problem. I'm old school, right? If you're asking me that, technically, we already have an issue. Like, what's your end game? Do you really expect to achieve the dream and the division that you have? That's why I always start out with where do you want to see yourself in 1 year? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And where do you see yourself in 20 years? You know, and most people freak out. It's just that question, that scale of question, because they're like, man, I never even thought about it. I'm like, so if time is your most valuable resource, are you using it wisely towards your goals, right? Now we're starting to dial everything in and become aligned with our destiny, our dreams, our desires, our potential. So I like to use the time management. All you need is 3 hours a day. If you can't get 3 hours, whatever I like to say it like this, whatever time you got to practice a day divided by three, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I'll share this with you how it happened to me. It was just like kind of like a revelation thing. And it happened during school. But I'll give you I can give you the technical version, which takes longer, but I'll give you the quicker version. I call it the street version. You, Nate, you're a drummer. You're cool. You work a 9 to 5, but you love to play drums. You don't get a chance to practice all the time, but your bros call you, hey man, come jam out at the bar tonight. You're like, cool, man. Yeah, I need to get away, clear my head. I grab a beer, blah blah blah, and go do my thing. Right? You show up, songs you already know, but you're just bashing, you're having fun, you're letting it all go. You're with your bros, and it feels good. And all of a sudden, you see the door open, people's tripping, heads of rubbernecking or whatever, and you see this guy with his entourage. You don't really catch his face, but he's sitting in the back, right? And you're like, whatever, we're gonna do our thing, right? We don't know who's that, whatever. So you go, you have another half a set or whatever, finish out the set, and all of a sudden this guy comes out from the shadows, you know, and he's like, it's Sting. And you're like, what the fudge? Sting was at our local pub, sort of. What are the chances? What are the odds, right? And all of a sudden he's like, you know what, Nate? I was really thinking your sound, man. May, oh my God, mate. I was jamming, I was back there dancing, and me and my girls here were having a blast. So first thing he does is he tells his manager, he gives you a card, gives you the card. He says, hey, give him the CD too. Hey man, check the tunes out, right? And when you think you're ready, give me a call and we'll jam. And he leaves, right? This happens all the time. This is how it happens. Not like this, but the concept of this happens for everybody every day, right?
Hmm.
What's the first thing you're gonna do after all the excitement, the hype? You talk with your bros, you're freaking out, your goosebumps finally calm down, right? You finally get your head on. What's the first thing you're gonna do? You're gonna listen, right? You're gonna learn, right? Basically, right? In a nutshell, you're gonna shed the songs. You're learning it, which is processing, right?
Hmm.
Second, now you got to normalize it. Okay. You got to make it normal, which is practice, right?
Right.
You process, you practice, and now you have to what? Apply. Okay. I got the songs. I'm ready. I've done all it. I mean, the spectrum of each individual thing, that's three different worlds, right?
Mhm.
Processing, practicing, and applying. The spectrum is very wide, right? Of each of those three worlds, and it's going to be different for every person. But at the end of the day, that sequence in order, learn, practice, play, or process, practice, play, um, works for everybody. It's timeless. It's been timeless. That's how it's always been. That's how it's always gotten done, right? And then you call up Sting, you go play, and next thing you know, you got the gig. You know, it works just like that for a lot of people. Why do we practice or why do we try to function in our own personal space out of this sequence? Well, I'm just going to shed on what did you process first? No
Yeah.
wonder why you're frustrated because you feel like you're not growing. You didn't actually input anything fresh.
You don't have a direction.
Exactly.
It's like you're driving without a GPS. Yeah.
Exactly. So my ABC practice method dials all that in. That's why it's the ABC, right? Whatever time you have divided by three, you know, and in a day, if you had 3 hours max, most people don't even have that, as you can see from my story, your story, having kids, wife, jobs, I'm never gonna knock a man working a 9 to 5. I've been a correction officer. I've been worked at Continental Airlines. I was a gas station manager. I worked at McDonald's. I worked at Arby's. Like I get it, bro. I cut hair. I used to cut lawns. Like I'm a hustler. Whatever I got to do to feed myself some tacos,
Yeah.
preferably carne asada or turkey, ground turkey. But I think you get the point, right? Like the practice, the template works for everybody. What we put in A, what we put in C, what we put in A, what we put in B, what we put in C is dependent on per student, right? It's always tailor made. But to process in this sequential order, what are you doing? Strengthening your processor. You know what I'm saying? So you can evolve, man. That's what it's all about. I don't want to get caught up in the whole style and because what's prog today will be prog very, very different prog in 5 years. You
Mm.
know, what's Latin today, fusion today is becoming more reggaeton, Miami thing. I'm like, whoa, now we got Euro and reggaeton. Like, wow, this is happening fast.
We do.
You know what I'm saying? So that's a rat race. Don't get caught up in that. Just know the very foundation, the elements and core of everything. I love some of my computer tech friends out of LA. They said, what's funny? He said all this technology and people think it's all so vastly different. It all starts with the same type of computer chip, you know, and then we build other things from there. So just in a nutshell, that's how I set everything up, and that's usually how I flow in my own practice time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a fantastic note to end on, and right on cue. We're at the top of the hour, so I have to let you go. Really, really appreciate your time. This has been fantastic. Maybe at some point we can do a part two, but I think people will really love this. So thanks again so much, and have a great rest of your day.
You too, man. Yeah, let's do a part two. It was cool. Nice
Sounds
to meet
great.
you, bro.
Likewise. Take care.